morning, folks. Sorry about the delay. Had a little microphone glitch here, but we're back. We're live at Pirkei Avos with Rabbi Chaim Coffman. I'm so enjoying this class, and I know today we're doing a bit of a transition into the next Mishnah, and I'm sure Rabbi Chaim's going to beat me up a little bit because I probably need it more than most. But it's going to be a wonderful class, and I'm so overjoyed that he takes the time out of his very busy schedule to share with us the ethics of the Father. Rabbi Chaim, how are you today? So good to see you, and the stage is yours.
Doing great. Welcome, everyone. We're going to hit the fourth Mishnah in the first chapter. Remember, last week we spoke about fear of heaven, right? How you need fear. Fear is the base of our service to God, right? 100% the base, but it's not everything, right? Fear is not necessarily going to lead to love of God. Love of God will lead to fear of God. And fear of God is something that you need. I mean, it is basic. You do need it, but the fear of God that we should have is the fear of knowing God is awesome. Not just the fact I'm going to fry in hell forever. That's the lowest level, right? That we spoke about. It comes along the Mishnah. Mishnah, chapter 1, Mishnah 4. Mishnah 4 says, Yossi ben Yoezer. He was the leader of Sreida, right? Certain place, Sreida, and Yossi ben Yochanan. Right, Yossi, the son of Yochanan, leader of Jerusalem. They received the tradition from them, right? From the previous rabbis. And Yossi ben Yoezer, the leader of Sreida, says, let's say better, let your house be a meeting place for sages, sit in the dust of their feet, and drink in their words thirstily.
Thirstily.
Here, exactly. Thirstily. So here, it's going to be interesting. What does it mean? What does it mean that your house should be a meeting place? Right? So all the Tanaim, the earlier rabbis in this chapter, interesting enough, received the transmission in pairs. Right? They received it in pairs, meaning from two different people. They just didn't receive it from one person, two different people. Right? They received it from this one and that one. Right? That is significant. So who they receive it from? They received it from first person they got it from, the previous one was the exilach. Right? Every generation there was an exilach. And the second one was the head of the Beis Din. Right? He was the head of the rabbinical court. Right? So when they got it in pairs, it doesn't just mean, okay, these two passed it down, these two people, these two rabbis who gave it over were significant. One was the leader of the generation, the exile. One of them was the head of the rabbinical court, what we call the Beis Din. Right? The head of the rabbinical court. Now, the Mishnah here says, let your house be a meeting place for the sages. Now, when the sages come, right, imagine you're going to have a very special guest come to your house. Your house has to be ready. Right? Obviously, if you have an important guest, you're going to clean it up. You're going to make it look nice. Right? How could it be that when they come, a person won't learn anything from them? In other words, it says, let your house be a meeting place for them. They're going to come and you're going to learn from them. You're going to learn even from the mundane things they seem to say, if they say any mundane thing. Right? Because you're going to learn from their actions. You're going to learn how they speak to one another, the respect that we'll see, that they have one for another. Right? So it's impossible. It's 100% impossible that a person is going to come and say, oh, I didn't learn anything. How could it be you didn't learn anything? Right? So the parable. The parable is, if someone went into a perfume place, even though they don't buy anything, right? They go in a place, they sell perfume, fragrances, all these things, and even though you don't buy anything, they take the nice smell with them. it reverberates on them. In other words, osmosis. It affects them in a positive way. I mean, depends if you like the smell. Let's say better, right? Depends if they if they like the smell. If you don't like the smell, okay, right? But you don't have a choice in this case because you are going to be in a place where the smell itself is going to reverberate on them. So anyone who's ever been by great rabbinic scholars, even for a little bit of time, you're sort of like maybe rubbing shoulders a drop. You see them. It has an effect. It reverberates on the person just by being in their presence. Why? Because they have an aura. Right? The true Torah giants, you can see it on their face. You can see it how they walk. You can see how they talk to others. Right. But they reverberate the aura or the aura. Right? They have this countenance. It's hard to explain. Anyone who's seen it understands what I mean. So how do they get to this level? How do they get to this level? They get to this level by all the Torah that they learned, by all the character traits they work on their whole life. That's how they get there. It's through hard work. The Talmud tells us in Chagiga, chapter 2, Mishnah 2, explains that over here we have the first difference of opinion, right, in the history of rabbinic literature. There's a difference of opinion that explains between Yossi ben Yoezer, Yossi the son of Yoezer, and Yossi ben Yochanan. They had the first disagreement of opinion. Now you're going to say, okay, what did they disagree about? Well, what was the first disagreement in rabbinic literature? About smicha. What does smicha mean? Literally means the placing of the hands. Right, on a festival, there was an obligation for a person to place their hands on the animal. So the question, if you're allowed to, why? Because you're not allowed to use an animal on Shabbos or on a festival. So when you put your hands on them, it's like you're using them. So no question, am I allowed to do it? So here, there's a difference of opinion. Right? Now, even though you have a difference of opinion, what's the Mishnah here talking about? The Mishnah here is speaking about honoring rabbinic scholars.
Definitively.
Right? Sitting in the dust of their feet, drinking their words thirstily. Right? So even though there's a difference of opinion between Yossi ben Yoezer and Yossi ben Yochanan, what was the difference of opinion in? Jewish law. It wasn't a disagreement between them as people. Oh, you said this. No, I said that. No. Back and forth. It was a disagreement in Jewish law. Nonetheless, each one gave honor to the other because it was an argument for the sake of heaven. It's a clarification of Jewish law. Now, even though it's a clarification of Jewish law, there can be a very big, heated discussion. In other words, there are many disagreements between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. Right? The house of Hillel, the house of Shammai. Wasn't personal. They disagreed in a lot of things. But even though they disagreed in a lot of things, they had their children marry each other. So you're going to say, wow, I didn't hold by this or I don't hold by that. Right? But obviously they felt it was okay for their children to marry each other. So we're going to see later what an argument for the sake of heaven. Right? It's an argument between Hillel and Shammai. Right? An argument obviously for not for the sake of heaven. Who's going to be that? You got Korach, you got others. So nonetheless, if it's for the sake of heaven, we'll just touch on this for a second. If it's for the sake of heaven, what's the purpose of the argument? To get to the truth. Now I remember, and there's a difference between, how the ultra-Orthodox look at things, how other people we'll call them, let's say modern Orthodox, others, that when we learn the text, what are we learning it for? To know what the truth is. We're learning to know what the halacha is. What are the ramifications that come out of what the text says? Right? Other people will say, you know what? Yeah, that's also important. But I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna push you down. You're gonna say, oh, I think like this and like this and like this, and this is what the text says. I'm gonna knock you down. You know why? Because I'm gonna knock you down. I want to show my superiority in arguing. Right? Now, I saw this learning yeshiva, a certain type of yeshiva, right? And it was all about upmanship. That's not Torah. Doesn't matter if they're 10 times more intelligent than you or not. But if they put you down and say, oh, come on, my dead grandmother could have explained it better than that. Come on, that's not what it means. But they're not doing it for the sake of heaven. What are they doing it for? They're doing it to show not only you wrong, but to put you down. Right? So here, even though there's a difference of opinion, and we know there are many cases of a difference of opinion between the house of Hill and the house of Shammai, they showed respect. Now again, you can disagree. You can have differences of opinion. You can disagree vehemently, but you have to have respect. They're going to say, but there are some rabbis don't respect others. So it depends. If it's something where these rabbis are heretics, can't really call them rabbis, they're heretics, right? So then I'm allowed to make fun of them for a purpose. It's all lashon hara. I'm allowed to expose them, even on social media, to warn people. Why? Because they're dangerous. They're heretics. But again, there are ways to do it. If you just have an axe to grind and you're going to trash them, that's forbidden. If you're doing it for a higher purpose because you want to warn people and you want to show these people are wrong and they're heretics, that's okay. They have to be exposed. The mitzvah to expose them. They say, oh, it's lashon hara. If the person's a mazik, person causes damage, say, nope, sorry, can't do anything. I shouldn't turn them into the authorities. It's lashon hara. What do you mean? Person's causing damage. He's leading people astray. Technically speaking, person leads someone astray. I could hide witnesses, get him to admit things, get him killed if there'd be a Sanhedrin today. These people deserve the stiffest penalty because they're leading people astray. Doesn't matter how much they know, whatever. But if they're heads of movement and they're taking people away and they're letting them go, they're helping them go astray, I can expose them. Right? That's not an issue. So, but, again, an argument for the sake of heaven has to be exactly that. Right? So even if you disagree, you still have to show respect. You're not going to call them names. You're not going to, it sometimes can get very heated. I remember, learning something, and one of the great rabbis of the last generation, was commenting on what someone else said, and his language was very strong. Right? In those days they didn't have a lot of paper like we have today. So like anything they could write on, they found to write their Torah novella. They would write on it. So paper was, pretty scarce. So one of the great rabbis of the last generation, or before, more than 100 years ago, right, said, oh, what a waste of paper. What a waste of parchment this person wrote. Because what he said is total garbage. I mean, he didn't say exactly like that, but something similar to how's that permitted? Because, what this other rabbi was saying, the ramifications, were pretty horrific if you would follow through the logic. Okay, so you have to understand, what the argument is, at their level, whatever. Right? But imagine you say, what a waste of paper. What a waste of books. What a waste of knowledge. Okay, you say that's lashon hara. Right? In this case, why isn't it not Lashon Hara? It's not Lashon Hara because they're getting to the truth. They want to know. They want to get to the truth. They do not want people to come up with the wrong law. And the ramifications are pretty strong. So therefore, the language that he used was strong. Was very strong. Now, you asked the $1 million question we spoke at the beginning. Recapitulation, what we spoke about last week. About fear of heaven. What's the connection? What's the connection to let your house be a meeting place for sages in the fear of heaven? Right? What's the connection? Torah tells us that fear of heaven and honor given to rabbinic scholars are intertwined. And you say, okay, show me. Where does it say that? Leviticus chapter 19 verse 32. Torah tells us, in the presence of an old person shall you rise, and you shall honor the presence of a sage, and you shall revere your God. I am Hashem. Direct command from God that an old person you rise up for. Walks in the room, you stand up for him. So even by a non-Jew, the Talmud says. Right? Usually it's someone over the age of 70. Even if they're an Amaretz, even if they don't know very much, even if they're a non-Jew. Right? There's a mitzvah to stand up for them, to give them honor.
Wow.
Right? But here it says also, you're going to honor the presence of a sage. So you see, standing up for a rabbinic scholar, how careful a person has to be with their honor. And where does that come from? It comes from fear of heaven. Because the rabbinic scholar does an unbelievable thing in that he nullifies himself to God, and he serves God in such an unbelievable way. We ourselves have to nullify ourselves to that rabbinic scholar and honor him by standing up for him, showing his worth as a rabbinic scholar, which is in turn respect for God and fear of heaven.
Right. Amazing.
Now, let's take it a little step further. That the Talmud says, makes fun of the Babylonians, calls them the foolish Babylonians. What do? They stand up for a Sefer Torah. When a Sefer Torah is taken out of the ark, you stand up. Why do you stand up? You honor the Sefer Torah, what's written in it. So the Talmud makes a crack against, the Bavlai Tipshai, these stupid Babylonians, the foolish Babylonians. What do? They stand up for a Sefer Torah. But when a rabbinic scholar walks in the room, a true rabbinic scholar who lives the Torah, that he himself is a walking Torah, how do you know to stand up for him? He represents the Torah at the highest level. Keeps it to the highest level. Why doesn't he deserve respect like a Sefer Torah? Right, I heard someone comment once. Great rabbinic scholar walks in the room, right? Walks into a wedding, whatever. It's like the parting of the Red Sea. Right? People stand up. So people say, is that worship? Isn't that idol worship? Of course it's not idol worship. First of all, you're not bowing to them. Second of all, you're not worshiping the person. That's idolatry. Right? Clear. That's idolatry. So what are you worshiping? What are you standing up for? You're standing up for the Torah that they know. In the Torah that they've learned and they put inside themselves. That's not idolatry. That's the ultimate in respect. Because after all, if they represent the Torah, how could you not stand up for them? How could you not show them that respect? And again, even if it's somebody that even doesn't know very much, the fact that they're older and the fact that they're closer to the previous generation, which means that they're closer to the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. So the further back you go, the more respect you have to have. Even though people say, oh, the Rambam, medieval, these ones, oh, they didn't have the technology we have today. Yeah, they do a heck of a lot more than we do. Right? The further back we go, we just say, you're going back to being a monkey. Right? In the academic world. Right? In other words, there's a famous story, just tell the story, in passing with Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, Zecher Tzadik Levracha. May his name be blessed, one of the great rabbis of the last generation, the Torah giants of the last generation. He was on an airplane, and they're sitting next to somebody, and his grandkids are waiting on him hand and foot. Zadie, Grandpa, can I get you this? Can I get you that? This other guy, sitting next to him, he's like, how'd you get your grandkids to, serve you like that? I only, my grandkids only call me, birthday, they need money. They don't have such a connection. So Yaakov Kamenetsky said, they look at me as a link in a chain. Right? I represent the previous generation. That previous generation is close, it's closer to giving the Torah Mount Sinai. So I'm a link in a chain. So Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky said, when your grandkids look at you, and you're the previous generation, they're looking at you like a monkey. Right? Because of evolution. And how everything evolves. So they're just treating you like a monkey. Right? So it's not just the knowledge that a person has. There are many people that can have encyclopedic knowledge. And it's a tremendous thing, when it comes to Torah. The problem is, what if the character traits aren't good? Then you can't learn from them. Right? But in general, we're talking about Torah scholars who have tremendous character traits. Right? So there's a mitzvah to stand up for them. Right? Because you're showing their worth as a rabbinic scholar for the Torah that they know, which in turn shows respect for God and fear of heaven. That's the connection to the previous Mishnah. Says the Vilna Gaon, Rav Elijah Vilna, learns that when a person's home is open to rabbinic scholars, they perform a positive command. Right? There are positive and negative commandments. Right? A positive command, put on tefillin. Right? Wear phylacteries, whatever they are. Keep Shabbos. Eat matzah. Right? So if a person opens their home to rabbinic scholars, you perform a positive command. What's the positive command? Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 22. Because if you observe the entire commandments, that I command you to perform it, to love Hashem your God, to walk in his ways, and to cleave to him, to attach yourself to God. Now, there's an obvious question, because the Torah then says, how are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? Because God is an Eish Ocheles. God is like a consuming fire. If you want to imitate God, you want to go in his ways, you want to cleave to it, you want to cleave to him, you're going to get burnt. You can't do it. Right? Because God is like a consuming fire. So the answer is, Medrash tells us, how are you going to cleave to God? That means to cleave to rabbinic scholars. Because when you cleave to rabbinic scholars, they represent God's Torah. Right? That means we should eat and drink with them, do business with them, attach ourselves to them as much as possible. Because even if you eat and drink with them, you learn something. I remember, even the simple conversations, that you may have, you still learn something. So I remember I had my Rabbi once speak when I had a learning institution here. And I took two of my older kids. They were much younger. And I took them to go pick them up. Right? To go pick them up. Right? They should see him. They should have a connection as well. So I went to go pick him up. He was in the middle of saying grace after meal. Right? After he ate bread. So, or that actually was right before. He said, okay, I have to bench. I have to say grace after meals, and then we're going to go. And my kid just sat there in awe. Every word enunciated. Forget Kabbalah. We're not talking about Kabbalistic intention. They saw how he benched. So you're going to say, what can a person see that? Okay, he mumbles words. God forbid. He's saying these words, whether God needs it, doesn't need it, whatever. But they saw the holiness. They saw someone who's a servant. Someone who's an Eved Hashem. Someone who serves God properly at a very high level. That made a big impression. Made a very, very big impression. So over here, even if we're in their presence, we learn from them even from the most basic and simple conversation. You don't have to have this great philosophical conversation, ask a question no one's really thought of. Just interacting with them has an influence. And has a positive influence. I can tell you, my own personal life, Torah Giants, I've had an opportunity to be in contact with and speak to, change my life in many ways. Right? Doesn't make me on their level by any stretch. Right? But at the same time, when you see that, you get fired up, even more fired than me. You get fired up. The Energizer Bunny explodes. He explodes from what? From the holiness of the situation. Of getting the vibes. Of seeing the aura. I saw my Rabbi the other day, last week. The beginning of this week. On Sunday. And it's just an unbelievable thing just to watch him pray. To see his face when he says Shema Yisrael. When he says Hashem Hu Elokim. God is the one who's in charge. He's the true judge. And you see the fear of heaven written all over his face. That makes an impression. Okay, you got to tell me it's not a simple conversation. You're right. It's not a simple conversation. But whatever they do, you can learn from. You can glean from them. Just by seeing what they do. Comes on the Sfas Emes. Sfas Emes is the second Ger Rebbe. Sfas Emes says the person should always attach themselves to rabbinic scholars. As we mentioned, because they are the epitome of what Torah is. So if they're the epitome of what Torah is, I want to have a connection to that. Now, does that mean I'm going to reach their level? No, doesn't mean that. But the fact that I can have a connection to that definitely has an effect. Now, there's a technical thing here, right, which we'll see. It says, let your house be a meeting place for the sages. Now, how do you prepare your house? How is the house prepared? You got to be stringent in observance of kashrus. If you're a Jew, you want them to come to your house. How are they going to eat there? You got to make sure you have a high level of kashrus. Right? In other words, we're going to be stringent. We're going to be careful. We're not going to speak Lashon Hara. Right? The laws of modesty. They walk in. Can't have people walking around immodest. So your house, has to be prepared. You don't have to be prepared like you're having a special guest. But a special guest that you want to learn from, you want to glean from. Right? So you want to make them feel comfortable. How are you going to make them feel comfortable? By the food. Food has to be the highest level, highest standard. Dress. You got to be dressed properly. Your house has to be a vessel. A fitting vessel. Would you bring a Sefer Torah in your house like that? No. I mean, some people might. No proof. Right? A person, sometimes you see people at the Western Wall. Jews not dressed appropriately. Like the holiest place in the world. Someone will come in shorts. No respect. Forget a rabbinic scholar. This is like where the Holy of Holies was. the last wall that upheld the temple, the holy temple, the Beis HaMikdash. And you come to God's house. You come to pray at the wall in shorts. Disgrace. Non-Jews know better than that. No offense. They know better than that. What do you think? They're going to go to church in shorts, look like they're going to a ball game? In a tank top? Certainly not. I don't know, maybe more modern places. Maybe more modern churches they do. Right? But in most places, you're going to get dressed. You're going to get dressed appropriately. Right? So your house has to be ready. It has to be prepared. Because if it's not prepared, why are they going to want to step foot in there? Right? That's the first part of the Mishnah. That is the first part of the Mishnah of what it means to be a meeting house. Right? A meeting place. Now, this is going to be the fun part. This is going to be the fun part. We'll see if there's anything left of you. Sitting. Strap yourself down. It's going to go downhill from here. Sitting in the dust of their feet. Right? What does that mean? It means we should, again, want to be like the rabbis, go in their ways. Right? One explanation. Another explanation, sitting at the dust of their feet is showing them respect, showing them honor, which means standing up for them when they come into a room. So we mentioned kids should also enjoy the rabbis being there. Right? So we may, even what we may consider as something not so important, it's compared to dust. Why dust? Why dust? So there's a hint in the verse. Torah tells us before Yaakov confronts Esau, good old Uncle Esau, before Yaakov confronts him, the Torah says he's left alone and a man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. Right? Just like people fighting bring up the dust with their feet, so too, it's fitting to attach oneself to a rabbinic scholar and fight to understand what they say. So I had the merit for 5 years, once a week, take my Rabbi to probably the most powerful rabbinical court in the world here in Jerusalem. Got to hear all the cases, that's where I picked up my Yiddish, in this rabbinical court, but I had him to myself. I could ask him all kinds of questions. I took him to bar mitzvahs afterwards. I took him to weddings. I got my picture in the paper a lot. So, I had his perks. But in the end, since I had him to myself, I could ask him, why did they say this? Or why did the other rabbis go like this? Etc. So in that sense, the Talmud comes alive, the commentaries come alive. But I was there to learn, and I wanted to know, okay, why did it go this way? Why did it go the other way? Right? Not as thinking, oh, I know better. Right? That wasn't the case. But it was fighting to understand what they say. Right? Trying to get the bottom of of absolute truth. I remember once, my Rabbi grew up in England. So he speaks English like the Queen. So I remember once I was asking him something about end-of-life issues. Right, happens to be an expert in that also. Right, medical ethics. So he started explaining certain things, and he spoke really fast, and he saw I was lost. Right, within the first few minutes. So he goes, I don't understand. He said, what's the problem? I'm speaking your language. English. I said, well, maybe you'll say American because you're actually English. You still drink tea with milk. That's okay. But he looked at me. He's like, what's the matter? You didn't get it? He spoke like a mile a minute. I caught like every fourth word. And it's a complex thing. It wasn't like a yes or no type of thing. Right? This is like end of life type of issues. And like within 3 minutes, he's quoting this, quoting that, this, whatever. I was lost. I was like, well, what about this? I was like, wait. And he's like, he's a genius. He's an absolute genius. So he's already on his fourth subject. I'm still trying to pick up the first one. So I was like, what's the matter? You didn't get it? I'm speaking in your language, English. So yeah, sometimes it's hard to understand what they say because, sometimes they're just in another planet. They're just on a different level. Right. But at the end of the day, you got to be like a sponge. And so I was more like a nudnik. I was just like, okay, what about this? And what about that? And how come you did this and not like this? And so I remember once I had my Rabbi something I was buying for Shabbos. For 3 Shabbos when I was moving from one place to another. My wife and kids were in the States. So the first Shabbos was just me and him. His wife was sick and had a Filipino taking care of her. So it was just me and him. So I was able to, it's an unbelievable experience. So I was able to ask him anything. What about this? What about that? Whatever. So I asked him something and he said, I see you're very religious. I said, that's great. I go, what's the answer? So I kept pushing him, and most people will say, if you see who this person is and his stature and everything else, the only person who's able to listen, if he doesn't want to move or give an answer, he's not going to. It's like the irresistible force against the immovable object. That's what it was. But I never took no for an answer. That's how I got my foot in the door. Do a whole show on that. Inspire people how to be chutzpah they can get in. Right? But in the end, I just kept hucking him. I was like, what about this? And what about that? And he looked at me and goes, you're very religious. I see you're very religious. I said, I know I'm religious. Give me an answer. What's the answer? So when I ask questions like that, not to be obnoxious. I mean, people could say, oh, isn't that being obnoxious, not showing respect? No, because I got an answer. And I got notebooks, a few notebooks of all questions I've asked them, more than 500 at least. And I wouldn't, publish all of them, but, you're talking about a Torah giant, like one of the top 5 rabbinical authorities in the world, according to everybody, right? So, he says something or you want information, okay, you have to know how to get it. But I wanted to understand, okay, why not like this? Why like this? And he would explain it. Say, okay, we don't do this because of this. We don't do that because of that. Whatever. He said, no, don't worry about it. It's fine. I was like, no, but what about this? Right? So, you want to know what to do. And you also want to be able to give that over. I mean, depending if you would ever publish it or not. Right? But to give these things over to the next generation. You want to understand what they're saying. And how, how it affects you and how to look at things. Give one example. Give one other example. I used to sit with him while he ate breakfast in the morning. And he was drinking tea, obviously with milk because he's still English. And he's in the middle of drinking tea and he left the kitchen. Right? So there's a rabbinic law that if you leave your tea uncovered or any drink uncovered and you leave the room, you have to spill it out. Why? Because they were worried, the rabbis were worried that since they didn't have wood floors, they're worried about snakes. And if snakes come in, they can put poison in the cup. They're going to say, okay, the reason doesn't apply today. We don't have wood floors today. Most people don't have wood floors today. Right? But it's brought down that danger is we're much more stringent by something that's dangerous than by something that is forbidden, like a forbidden food. Right? There's a general rule. If it's something that's dangerous, we're much more stringent. So I asked him about it. I said, how could you leave it uncovered? It's much more dangerous. It's like, nah, says, don't worry about it. Like, what do you mean? I said, much more dangerous. I said, you're an 8th generation disciple. Sorry, 8th generation, grandchild through your mother. Right, to the Vilna Gaon, Rav Elijah Vilna. And he was unbelievably stringent in this. I said, how could you leave it uncovered? So he looked at me and he goes, nah, it's fine. He says, don't worry about it. So I was like incredulous. I was like, how could you do that? So he goes, listen, I only keep what the Vilna Gaon says if it doesn't drive me crazy. Right? At my age, this is already about 15 years ago, more, 20 years ago. So he said, at my age, if I didn't remember every time I left the room and I didn't cover my tea, right? I didn't cover what I was drinking, it would drive me crazy. So he said, I'm too old. What about the danger? He said, what about being crazy?
So danger there.
So we're going back and forth. I go, but it's dangerous. He goes, it's crazy. I can't drive myself crazy. Right? So something like that, okay, right? For most people, they'll still cover it, right? Because it's dangerous, but for him, I'm not going to worry about it. Why not? So he's got his own reasons why, right? But that's something, he held by very strongly, right? He said, no, I'm not going to worry about it. It's, whatever. But how are you ever going to get that information if you don't ask? Right? If you have the ability to ask, you ask. And that's how you get somewhere. That's how you get answers, right? There are people who would tell me different things. Oh, I bet he doesn't hold this. I'm like, well, you're wrong. He said, how do you know I'm wrong? Because I said, I know what he holds. I know what he says. The reason I know is either I've gone through a lot of his books or I've asked him myself. Right? But that's how you learn. Because then if he says, nope, I'm not worried about it. Why not? I'll bring you 4 reasons why you should. And he'll knock all of them off. And he'll say, nope, don't have to worry about this. Don't have to worry about that. This reason, that reason, whatever. That's how you learn. Right? So over here, it's fitting to attach oneself to a rabbinic scholar and fight to understand what they say. Because not everything they say is clear, or it may not be clear to us. Right? We're in a much weaker generation. They're much greater than us. Right? So what do? You push them a little bit. I mean, not the way I did, obviously. But you push them. You say, okay, but why? Why is it like this? Or why is it like that? That's how you learn. That's how you grow. Right? That's what it means to be the dust under their feet. You're going to glean from what they say. Right? You're going to take what they say, and if you don't understand it, you're going to get clarity. Right? And whatever it is, you're going to see why they hold what they hold and why they do what they do. That's a huge thing. Because then you come back and say, oh, this is what he does. Right? This is the reason. So that is the dust. That went easy on you. I didn't crush you in the dust.
No,
right?
you did.
That is the dust. That is being in the dust, so to speak, of their feet. Now, the last thing in the Mishnah here is drinking in their words thirstily. Right? What does that mean? If a person is thirsty, you're going to drink to the heart's content. Right? You're thirsty. I'm not saying you're dying of thirst per se. Right? You're dehydrated, but a person's thirsty. You want to quench your thirst. So too, person should take the words of a rabbinic scholar. Thirstily. It's like you're dying to hear what they have to say. Now again, some people are going to say, isn't that like you're worshiping them? And again, you're worshiping the Torah that they know. That's not idol worship. Because what do you want over here? What are you drinking over here, so to speak? What's the Kool-Aid that you're drinking? That you're hearing the words of Torah as if you're missing something. It's like you're lacking something. This I have to hear. This I have to be there. Right? It's going to have an impact on me. I have to hear it. It's like I'm missing something. Just like a person's thirsty. A person's going to drink water or whatever to quench their thirst. It's not going to matter, because if you're thirsty, you almost drink anything. Right? Just to quench the thirst. So too, a person's going to work very hard to learn Torah, feel the sweetness. Why? Because when you feel the sweetness of Torah, you are going to uplift the soul. Now, a person who's ever learned and has ever had, enjoyment of Torah knows how sweet it is. Now, it doesn't mean it's easy to understand, right? But when a person gets clarity and the light bulb goes off, and you see how the whole picture fits together. When you see how the whole picture fits together, and you see design, you see order, You see how it all works? How it all manifests itself, how it fits? That's tremendously sweet. That's enough to the soul. That's saying, yeah, it's clear to me as day that the Torah is true. It's clear to me as day that it all works. It all fits together. There's design. What does that do for the soul? Tremendous. It's a total uplift of the soul. Now, some learn that the thirst for Torah in understanding is even after you stop learning. I would have understood the thirst for Torah is when you're learning. And you want more, you want more, and you want more. Right? One explanation is even if you stop learning, you still have the thirst. What does that mean? Just like someone drinking salty water, I don't recommend it. You drink salty water, it's going to make you more thirsty, and it doesn't quench your thirst. Right? So if a person has a thirst for Torah, that thirst should be even afterwards. Even when a person goes to sleep, as many of my rabbis would say, think of a good question. Think of something you learned before you go to sleep. Why? So your mind is clear. You're not going to think about other things. You think about Torah, even when you're sleeping. That's the thirst. In other words, it's like someone has a question, and they're working on it. No, this doesn't work. That doesn't work. This, that, back and forth. And they're bothered. The question bothers them. Why? Because they want an answer. They want to know what the answer is. In the end, that's the thirst for Torah. There's a story of a great rabbi that wanted to find a prospective match for his daughter. So his yeshiva threw out a question, very, very difficult question. And he said, whoever can answer it will have the merit to marry my daughter. People try this, that, other thing. A very, very difficult question. People couldn't answer. Right? They couldn't figure it out. Right? They might say, what's it going to be? You're not going to find someone for his daughter. But afterwards, as the head of the yeshiva was leaving, there was a student in the yeshiva ran after him. He said, I have to know what's the answer. Tried like this, tried like that. And he wasn't willing to let him go until he gave him the answer. So the head of the yeshiva said, that's the one I want for my daughter. Because he wasn't satisfied. He said, okay, maybe we'll figure it out, won't figure it out. It bothered him so much, he had to hear what the answer was. That's someone who's a spiritual seeker. That's someone who wants to go after absolute truth. Because if there isn't an answer, you keep digging and digging and digging. And you take it with you, even if you don't figure it out today. Maybe you figure it out tomorrow. If you don't figure it out tomorrow, you figure it out the next day. There was a story my Rabbi told a few weeks back. A story of the Brisker Rav, famous Brisker Rav, name be blessed, the son of Rav Chaim Brisker. And he met up at a wedding with the Tribuna Rav. Tribuna Rav was a great rabbinic scholar in his own right. And he met him at a wedding. And at the wedding, the Tribuna Rav said to the Brisker Rav that 30 years before the Brisker Rav had a question he didn't have an answer to. He couldn't answer. So he said he was so glad he saw him because he came up with an answer. They have to imagine this is after the war. The person must have suffered tremendously during the war. And how he escaped and all that. And the Brisker Rav said, he didn't hear one word about the war. He didn't say anything about the war. What bothered him was the question the Brisker Rav asked him 30 years ago. 30 years!
Wow.
And he came in contact and he said, I got an answer. I got an answer to the question. That means, and that shows thirst for Torah. Thirst for truth. So, rabbinic scholars are also called Talmidei Chachamim. Right? What's Talmidei Chachamim? Literally, students of the wise. Right? Because they thirst to learn God's Torah, and they never stop learning. Another explanation is the fact that a Talmud is a student. Right? A student. So a student over here, even if he's a great rabbinic scholar, he's still a student. He still wants to learn from others, even if they're less than him. Right? Even if they're not on the same level. But he's always learning. And he wants to hear what other people have to say. And also, in this case of quenching a person's thirst, it's not, a person will do whatever it takes to quench their thirst. Even if the water is bitter. Even if the water is bitter. As long as it does the job. They'll drink it because they want to quench their thirst. So too, someone who's with rabbinic scholars, they'll do whatever it takes trying to understand them. Right, as we said before. And their ways. Because what you glean from them, and I've said this a lot, that I guarantee I've gained a heck of a lot more from my Rebbe than he ever gained from me. Right? I don't think there's any question about that. For whatever reason, he let me in and let me develop this connection. Right? So I grabbed it with, 2 arms, 2 legs, and, grabbed it for all it's worth.
Held on, yeah.
To understand, where he's coming from, what makes him tick. And it's, someone who's a genius, very hard, right? Because you don't follow their train of thought. Because they're a genius, right? Makes it a little more difficult, right? A little more difficult. But, when you understand their ways, you try and understand their ways. And someone like that lets you in, you do whatever it takes. Right? In other words, you want to get whatever you can, glean whatever you can. If you think about it, too many people like this left in the world that had, a connection to the previous generation. To the great rabbis of the previous generation. Right? And he tells stories about a lot of them. Brings them back to life. We're talking like, these people more than 100 years ago. That they lived. I mean, you can't imagine who these people are. And what they knew. But the fact that he's still a bridge to that generation. And he gleaned from them, from many of them. Right? Exactly what this says. Right? So thirsty for Torah, you never stop. Right? You can learn from anyone. Obviously, they have to have proper character traits, right? But at the end of the day, what are you taking from it? It's one thing you say, like, you grew up in this, like, rabbinic dynasty or whatever, and everyone hobnobs with everyone else because you were part of it or whatever. But if you got the foot in the door, and you weren't necessarily from that, all the more so. Right? If a person's really a seeker, and is really a seeker of truth, then all you have to do is open yourself a little bit. God's going to do the rest. Because I can tell you I'm living proof. Because where I came from, people say that, someone who lives in Israel, you see miracles. I said, yep, that's definitely true. They said, what miracles have you seen? I said, the fact that I have a connection, I've had a connection to one of the Torah giants of the last generation for more than 20 years. From where I came from, that's a miracle. That's an absolute miracle.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think there's any question about that. We're not in the same league by any stretch. But the fact I got my foot in the door, And the fact that he changed my life in so many different ways, again, I told the story by my kids watching him say grace after meals. That's an unbelievable thing to see. Because there you see greatness. You see greatness by just the way he prays. By the way he does mitzvahs. By the way he talks. By the way he learns. Has an effect. Right? And if a person wants the connection to God, you have to really want it. You can't just think it and say, yeah, I want, whatever. You have to really want it. You have to really open yourself up. Because when you do that, God's going to show you the way. Now, someone told me earlier today that, I wanted God to show me, put me in the right direction, and I ended up as a messianic. Or I ended up like, I know people that like came out of Christianity, became Amish. Then they were like messianics, or they're messianics and Amish. They were Noahides, went to Reform, conservative, eventually came to Orthodoxy and, eventually converted. But someone said, but, I wanted God to show me the direction. Well, you got there eventually. No one gets there in one shot. Some people do. But obviously God wanted you to go through that as a stepping stone or whatever. For whatever reason. I mean, I went through a lot of things, a lot of different stages. In different, pretty much, it's all within Judaism. Right? I said, this is the truth. Nope. Nope, this is the truth. Nope. It took me a while to find it. But once I found it, I haven't turned back. Right? So the obvious question is, okay, so why'd you have to go through a circuitous route? Why'd you have to go around in circles? Why couldn't have been just direct, straight? So some people have that. Now it could be other people have to go through other things because they have to give over these experiences. So people can actually learn from them and not make the same mistakes. Right? Because you can't say, wow, that's your opinion. You're right. That's my opinion from what I saw. Right? Someone said, I have an ebook. Anyone who wants it, contact me. I said, someone asked, they said, what do you have to offer? Like, that's only your opinion. What you wrote is your opinion. I go, you ever study history? I was a history major in university. I said, did you ever study history? I said, you know what history is? His story. That's what it is. It's how someone else gives it over. You're going to say, aren't they biased? Of course they're biased. They have their biases. The biases come out. No one's really truly objective today. I don't think anyone's really that objective. They have an agenda. Most people have an agenda.
Yeah, you're reading my questions, Rabbi.
Most people will have an agenda. So I said, so it's no different. Why should I be any different? So I also have an agenda. Big deal, but it's based on what I saw. Based on my life experience. You want to take that away? You say, nope, that's not the way it happened. That's not what it is. But that's the way I saw it. That's the way I understood it. So they know that's skewed. All right, you want to argue? You can argue about it. Right? But at the end of the day, a person has to look and see, what do they want in life? Where are they going? What are they doing? What's the purpose of it all? The purpose of it all is exactly what we said, to cleave to God. Right? As the Ramchal says in Derech Hashem, the way of God. Speak about that more in depth on Sunday. Right? For No-Eyed Nations. Speak about that. The purpose to enjoy this world. And how to enjoy this world. There are a lot of obstacles. A lot of obstacles.
Sure there is.
But the only way is to cleave to what God wants. Right? To cleave to Him. Even though, in theory, that's impossible. Because we can't be God. Right? Nonetheless, we can cleave to His message. We can cleave to what.
Ooh, I don't know what that was. We had a